Back live with you tonight on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. Let's get back to the story now. 2 children burnt beyond recognition last night in a hijacked Hillbrow building that caught fire. The Florence Nightingale Building has reportedly been illegally occupied for several years and was deemed unfit for human habitation. The city of Johannesburg has in recent months been trying to reclaim these hijacked buildings as housing in the metro municipality. Now, this, of course, is a challenge, major challenge that they have to deal with. Now, we look more at that particular issue and with a sharper focus, I suppose, into this particular building and more broadly on hijacked buildings in the CBD. We are joined now in studio by Johannesburg Public Safety MMC Dr Mgcini Tshwaku and the Executive Director of Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, Nomzamo Zondo, as well as Thabo Mayisela, Special Advisor to the Johannesburg Executive Mayor on the inner city regeneration. Good to have you all, and thank you very much for your time and coming on here on In Focus. Mr. Mayisela, let me begin with you because I want you to give us the context of this, and in the context, of course, of a broader challenge of hijacked buildings in the city of Johannesburg. But we are zooming in particularly on the Florence Nightingale Hospital. Who are the owners of this building, and why has it been left for such a long time unattended to?
Thank you very much for having us. The building, initially, it was a hospital. It was owned by the provincial government, and the provincial government then gave the building to a trust. A trust was supposed to run a program in the building of rehabilitating ex-offenders. That trust has since derelict its duties, and that's why the building was then invaded. The challenges have been the route that we would take to acquire that building. Initially, we litigated against the trust on the basis that there were rates and taxes that were being owed, and we then ran into problems because we were then advised that to litigate against the trust, you have to cite the individual trustees, and we were unable to get those trustees. So we were then embroiled in lengthy legal battles, and then ultimately, as the city, we opted for the expropriation of that building. So it was a combination of legal problems that resulted in the delays that we experienced in terms of acquiring that property.
Yeah. Legal wrangling, MMC, does that prevent bylaws from being implemented, I suppose, in these particular buildings?
No, thank you very much, Thabo. Yes, it does. Remember is that through an operation that we have is called Operation Manje Namhlanje, we've been working with the EMS and the other, the stakeholders, the JMPD, to go into these buildings. Now, when we went inside these buildings, there's illegal dumping inside. There's waste inside, especially the one that you are talking about. And there's no electricity. People are, like, they use imbawula inside. And we've actually closed it because using this EMS, because I go with the EMS, it must be closed. But now the trick is, when you close it, where do you take those people? That's where we are right now, because we are looking for an alternative accommodation for the people. But we came up with something as a public safety.
Yeah, I'll come back to what you come up with. As Siri, these buildings are inhabitable. People can't live in these buildings under these conditions. For example, bylaws would not allow, for example, for you to start a fire if there's somebody living below you and you're on top, and which is something that could have happened here. We're not quite sure what the details are. But is there a limitation in the public safety coming in and saying this is illegal, cannot have this kind of arrangement here, and therefore do something about it?
So the limitation comes if the concern is first about closing a building as opposed to housing residents. So as the MMC has already clarified, it's a trick for them. For us, it's the first concern. The first concern is, where will these residents be housed? Similarly, in the issue of lack of basic services, the city provides basic services. If the building doesn't have electricity, it means the city has either disconnected those services or has never provided them in the first place. If it doesn't have water, you are in the same position. If you ask Seri what should be done to address the inhabitability of these buildings, would say engage the community, provide basic services. If you don't have funds, engage province to provide those funds.
Yeah.
We think that's a much better solution than saying people must disappear. People can't disappear.
What happens in an instance now where this building was apparently given to a trust and the trust has gone up with the wind, so to speak?
So, but you heard Mr. Mayisela. He's clear. He says the city has opted to expropriate the building. The city now owns the building, which means that they are in control. They can go into that building, renovate it, they can engage the residents, they can decant the building floor by floor, start by renovating the first floor, moving people into the second floor, until they get to the 7th floor, which is the last floor in the building. I mean, the issue of this building is not new. People will remember that Adam Habib, when he was still the Vice Chancellor of WITS, he fought because Wits University residents was behind Florence Nightingale Building. And again, his solution was make the pool disappear. Yeah. We can't make the pool disappear. And also, it's not the only building like that. That's what he'll tell you.
Yes,
there are many others. We are saying address the issue by addressing the crisis, yes, and house the people. Yes. If you move people out of Florence Nightingale, they're going to go to another bed building. Right. So you're not going to, there'll be 2 more other children who will die somewhere else. Yeah. And we're saying have a strategy that addresses the issue. Yeah.
Let's bring you, Mr. Mayisela. You can come in here. It's your problem, I suppose, at this particular point. In any of these buildings, one, to provide them with services. And you're saying you were litigating around the payment of the services at this particular point. But it seems those services are still not there. What was the ultimate end coming out of that litigation? Okay.
We have not yet resolved the expropriation. It's a process that we are embarking on now. It's an issue that we have been discussing over a long period of time. So by no means I'm saying that we have successfully concluded the expropriation and therefore we own the building. No, we do not yet own the building. But we do agree that the city has got to remain an inclusionary city. There is no way where we are going to illegalize people on the basis that they are poor. As poor as they are, they belong to the city, and as the city, we have a responsibility to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. Even if we do not want, there is precedent set in the Constitutional Court where we have got to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. So we're not in any way trying to abdicate that responsibility. The issue, though, is in terms of our strategy to rejuvenate the inner city, we're doing it on a precinct basis. Yeah. And in that area, it is the Hillbrow Health Precinct. So what the discussions we've had with the stakeholders there is that we want to maintain health-related facilities within that precinct. Yeah. In actual fact, the discussions we had with the RHI, the Research Health Institute that is based within that precinct. When we initially wanted to acquire that building, we wanted to acquire and donate it to them so that they can utilize that building then because they had a need for it. But after they discovered that the building might be condemned, they lost interest in taking over that building. But the strategy was to ensure that we enhance the status of that precinct as a health precinct.
So there are over, 400, 500 such buildings that you are dealing with in the city. Yeah. What is your strategy in terms of where those people are going to go?
Okay. The strategy has multiple facets to it. One, where we have contested each other with Seri for a very long time up until we found each other, is that we have got to provide a temporary emergency accommodation. And the Department of Human Settlements in the city, it's a program now that they're taking quite seriously to a point that there is a plan in terms of buildings identified to be converted into TEA, and they are appropriating budgets to make sure that those projects are implemented. Because at the end of the day, whatever it is that we want to do, whether it is the individual building Florence or the whole other buildings within the city, the elephant in the room is always the people who are in there as to what do you do with them. And we take full responsibility as the city that they are our responsibility and we have got to take care of them.
Yeah. MMC, is there a particular approach that you take around what is called condemned buildings? I don't know if there's the legal definition, and what is abandoned building? Because we saw you the other time with the mayor for 2 days or 3 days, I don't know how long. You went with a big ganda that you demolished. And you said, no, this is an abandoned
not demolishing. We didn't demolish. No, we did not demolish. Look, we are for our people, poor and working class. And they've got my actually good heart. But, you know, I love them too much. I love them to a point that when I go and inspect these buildings, they are inhabitable. Maybe one day I will take you. If you go to my Twitter and all of that. In the building that we were last night, in the Florence Nightingale, in the Florence building. By the way, there is a preschool there. There's a preschool. There are kids staying there, a lot of them.
No water, no
water. There's no water, no operation.
There's dumping right there.
Dumping, everything. It happens there. And there's like, you've got this waste all over the shore. So I said to them, because I always meet up with them, with Siri, afterwards they actually came. I said to them, look, what we can do, I'm surprised on something that she just said right now. Something I proposed. I said, I don't want to use the word evict people. We say what is called a transition. Because, what we did, they've done an audit in Casamia, by the way. Casamia, almost 146 people there. They're earning a month over about 15,000. They can afford, some of them. And then you've got the ones that cannot afford. I said to them, right, we can help them to transition, to actually find them and accommodation. Not to say to have a blanket arrangement, say everyone, 300 of them must be given like that. We found each other at some point because I was going to be there, formed an office, then we transitioned because I'm worried about the buildings that are there. Some of them, their structural actually integrity is bad. There are reports like that. They can fall any time. So I engaged with Sari. I said, Sari, let's find each other. It's not even on buildings on Sari. It's issues of the hawkers everywhere as well. So it's actually a safety concern for me. And for my people, I said, I'm here for you. We will ensure that we find a place for you. And I'm happy now when she said, I propose that we can do what is called a renovations floor by floor. But now they countered. They said to me, no, but you can't do any work while people are there. I said, but let's do floor by floor. We can clean it up, then people can move. And all those who can afford can start paying the city, not paying to some individuals we don't even know. But that is what is currently happening right now. No payment of the others, they are paying some bank accounts, some that we don't even know. So we've done that audit, and I said with them, I said, guys, our people, they say some of them can afford, some of them will ensure that through the social development, which is also under the EFF as well, I mean, the MMC is there as well. There is a place where we can put the people who cannot afford. I said, I'm going to be with you. And there are people who've been staying there for almost like, about 30 years or so. Said, let us deal with individuals one by one. There are those who can afford, but they don't know where to get places.
All right. Let's take a break. We'll come back in a moment. We're still with the City of Johannesburg Public Safety MMC, Dr Mgcini Tshwaku, Executive Director of Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, Nomzamo, Zondo, and Thabo Mayisela, Special Advisor to the Johannesburg Executive Mayor on the inner city regeneration. Let's take your thoughts as well tonight, 072-110-5584. In Focus continues in a moment. City of Johannesburg Public Safety MMC, Dr Mgcini Tshwaku, with us tonight, Executive Director of the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, Nomzamo, Zondo, and Thabo Mayisela, Special Advisor to the Joburg Executive Mayor on the inner city regeneration. I wish people would have had the conversation during the break and the cameras would have been rolling to understand exactly what's happening here. But we're talking about the transition, right? You mentioned 146 people. Mr. Mayisela, I think you're saying there are over 4,500 families that you would need to be placing in some kind of housing, be it low-cost housing, be it temporary. The MMC speak of people who can afford and people who can't afford. And this means that there's different types of dispensation in terms of the housing that you need to provide. During the break, Nomzamo is saying some people have been waiting for more than 8 years. Since 2014 that you promised to give them this housing. What's the challenge? Why is it taking so long to be able to place these people?
The challenge began with a matter called the Blue Moonlight case, where a private owner wanted to evict people who were in his private property. As the city at the time, we said, hey, that's not our problem. It's your problem, private owner and the people in that building. But the Constitutional Court disagreed with us. The Constitutional Court made a ruling in that matter that says when people are evicted, an emergency arises, and therefore, as the city, we ought to provide them with alternative accommodation because it's an emergency. And we then argued that, look, in terms of housing provision, it's a national competence. It's not a municipal function. And therefore, in the housing code, there is no provision for emergency housing. And the Constitutional Court said, no, when an emergency arises, the city has the responsibility to respond to that emergency. And therefore, we need to make provision within our budget. So we then started embarking on that process out of that pronouncement. But we then had challenges in terms of the type of accommodation we need to provide. And subsequent to that, there was a matter called the Zaza matter. In the Zaza matter, essentially the elements that were argued in that matter were issues of the type of accommodation we need to provide. So we took all the matters that were in courts in terms of evictions, and we put them in what we call a stay application, where we stay those matters up until we resolve the Zaza matter. Subsequent to that, findings have been made, judgments pronounced, and therefore as the city, we then came up with a strategy called the Inner City Housing Implementation Plan to be able to respond decisively to the challenges we're confronting. It is a huge task, as you can imagine, having to, with the last audit which was done in 2022, the number had increased to just over 4,000. I think it was about 4,277 people who are on the waiting list where evictions have been secured, and therefore we need to remove those people and provide them with alternative accommodation.
And when is that going to happen?
No, it has already started. There are TEA facilities where people have been put in. Besides the Wembley Stadium.
What is the TEA facility? What does that mean?
Temporary emergency accommodation.
Okay. How temporary is the temporary?
They stay there.
That's a very good question, and that's the challenge we've had in terms of our engagement in courts with SERI. Because, you see, in terms of the provision of housing in the inner city, it is multi-layered. You have what we call shelters. There's one next to that facility they call number 3/4. We have quite a few of those. Shelters are overnight. So you come in, you sleep there, you are provided with a bed, a shower, and you leave the next morning. You also have temporary emergency accommodation. You have what we call affordable rental, and you also have social housing. In actual fact, the good thing that came out of these litigations that we've been having, as the city, we've come to the realization that social housing is not necessarily affordable, even though it is known also as affordable rental accommodation. But we've come to the realization that it is actually not affordable because there are a whole lot of people who cannot afford in terms of the threshold required for those rentals. And therefore, as the city, in parallel with providing the temporary emergency accommodation, we are also developing low-income rental units where people can then transition from these temporary emergency facilities to the low-income rentals, where they can afford to pay those rentals.
Yeah, from Mr. Mayisela, Nomzamo, it sounds like SERI and these court challenges, you've created a conundrum of bureaucracy.
No.
And all these areas that they need to fulfill. It's either a shelter, it's either a temporary accommodation, it's either an affordable rental, or it's social housing. And these are the various loops and hoops that they need to jump to in providing.
I have a very good friend of mine who works in the city of Johannesburg, who's a housing official. And he always says, Nomzamo, the problem is the city has decided to take a housing crisis and solve it through litigation. And so when he speaks about 4,200, he says these are people that are in court. Florence Nightingale is not in court, right? And he's telling you that it's in a very, very bad condition. And for as long as it's not in court, this is not doing anything about it. So even today, the MMC says he was there yesterday. Is there a tank outside the building today? Are the toilets outside the building today? Is there a plan to address that building today? You're not going to find that because no one has taken them to court. And SERI's role all this time has been to force government to engage with its people. Because the people that live in these buildings are residents of the city, and they should be taken care of by the city. And the fact that, so when he speaks about Dladla was determined in December 2017. That's now almost 6 years ago. In these 6 years, what has the city done to provide accommodation, and to whom has it provided accommodation? I can tell you, because it's all been cases that SERI has been involved in, because we've had to fight.
Right. Of the 4,000?
Nothing. About, I think it's about 500.
500, sure.
Households that have been housed.
In what? In 6 years?
6 years. And it's because at each point we've had to fight. As property owners who are seeking evictions, they've had to fight. When it comes to us saying to the city, let's sit around the table, let's have a plan, let's work together to implement that plan. There is no political will. So I'm quite happy to have MMC here, because I'm hoping he's going to bring also the MMC for Human Settlements, who I think is also a colleague.
We've actually met.
I mean, these are evictions. These are people who are in court, right? The 4,200 or so. It has not even begun to deal with the 400 buildings and those people who are there, which could probably be even more.
No, Thabo, I'm happy. I think maybe I'm one of the MMCs who have started to really engage, because where I'm coming from, my political party, the EFF, we learned to engage. They came to me, said, let's find a solution together. We had a meeting with the representative of SERI. I said, SERI, according to the fire brigade law, we have to close this building because it's going to collapse at any time. And our people, because they need to get economic freedom at the end. They must eat, they must enjoy it. And I can't, my conscience doesn't allow me to really for them, in this place, dirt, in this dark. And I said, let us engage. We engaged very nicely, very cordially. We even signed, I think we signed, if I'm not mistaken, we coined the word, just transition. Those who can afford, let's treat people and the individuals, those that can afford and those who can't. And then I'm going to be there. One by one, each person will be treated with dignity, because I don't want those buildings to really collapse, and I want to bring a dignity back like one for those people. And I said to them, and I'm glad that she was actually quoting that, and I hope we got that I said we can actually probably start with the renovation floor by floor. And also I said, I even proposed that let us demarcate the area, let us secure a building and ensure that we have what is called I think it's a secure, we know who's coming in and out, because in those buildings, other people go.
Access control.
They go, access control, a strict one. They go, and some of them, when they leave, they bring other people come in. And then when we're chasing criminals in the city, they go in those dark buildings because there's no access control. I said to CA, I have no problem of working with them because, to evict people, because I don't evict people. But we must come with a solution where we're going to do a transition. The audit that has been done, which shocked us to the core, was that a lot of people, especially in Casamia, the audit shows that majority of the people, they can afford. And I said, and I agree that some of them must be moved into the low-cost housing where they can able to really pay. And what I was even saying that is the city is losing a lot of revenue in terms of money that is put into like this discuss. Let us renovate these buildings. Let the people now be able to really pay. Even students, make it habitable. That's what I wanted, and I'm willing to work with SERI because we need to clean up. If it means that's going to take the whole year, 4 buildings like that, we can do that. With this strategy, I think SERI, it can work because we can talk. I said, don't treat people as 4,000. There are individuals I can sit with you. Sorry, sir, where are you coming from? I'm coming every day. Where are you working? Okay, how much are you earning? So much money. Okay, look, let us find a place for you, and then we can do that. Some of the people, we will see them, they say we can afford, but we don't know where to go. So that's why I'm saying that we can use that, whereas we're waiting for the city to erect buildings and all of that, because the city is getting chaotic. People are getting into buildings. They even occupied The central fire station. My central fire station has been occupied now, so I'm in negotiations with the people.
How are you then going to, because it seems the owners of the buildings have also been hijacked by certain criminal elements who are collecting rent out of these buildings. How are you going to retrieve the buildings from those elements back to the owners so that owners take responsibility?
So ours, Thabo, is very simple. We'll go into the building, we ask the owner for the building, whether the building is on the city or it is private, and then we do our own audit in terms of the floor plan. You've got the escape routes, you've got the fire, you've got the fire extinguishers and all of that. If that's not in place, we shut it down and say the owner must come into Martindale and come and claim that this, the thing is the building. But if there are people inside, we will start to really have a meeting with them and tell them, who are you paying this rent to? Others, they told us that they're just getting a number, an account number, somewhere that they go and pay. A majority of them. Yeah. So we don't mind. So we're saying that after we've done our inspection, we do our, the renovations, we put the building and register it as part of the city or wherever, then we're able now to say to redirect those rents back into the city. So those ones were really away. So we're just saying that when we're done with our stuff, with our work, the inspections and all of that, and it's fine, we've done, did those renovations, then the people must pay to the city.
All right, Nomzamo, I see. We're going to come back with you when we come back from the break. MMC for Public Safety, that is Dr Mgcini Tshwaku, Executive Director of Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, Nomzamo Zondo, and Thabo Mayisela, Special Advisor to the Johannesburg Executive Mayor on Inner City Regeneration. Your thoughts, 072-110-558. What you think they've got a handle on the situation, and this could be something that could be resolved at least in the next 18 months or so. Stay with us. Back live with you tonight on In Focus. City of Johannesburg Public Safety, MMC, Dr Mgcini Tshwaku, Executive Director of Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, Nomzamo Zondo, and Thabo Mayisela, Special Advisor to the Johannesburg Executive Mayor on the Inner City Regeneration. And we are, of course, talking hijacked buildings, especially in light of two children bodies that were burned beyond recognition in one of the buildings there in Hillbrow. Here's what you're saying tonight on WhatsApp. It's 072-110-558. Timothy in Joburg saying, Joburg Mayor Kabelo Kwamanda is calling Joburg a world-class city with hijacked buildings. What a joke. Dombi in Perea saying, what is the city doing to eradicate the hijacking of these buildings? Because people's lives are in danger here. Could it be that there are politically connected mafias running these buildings? I don't know who to give that to. Let me give it to you, Mr. Mayisela. Because there are buildings that are already hijacked. Of course, you're dealing with that. But possibly others that will be hijacked in the future. Do you have a plan and strategy of ensuring that this does not continue to happen?
This obviously requires the intervention of different agencies within government, whether it's your SAPS, whether it's your HOC, whether it's the city's Group Forensic and Investigation Services, to work together to try and be preemptive and not always be reactive. But when we have worked together in collaboration to try and address this problem, we have made significant successes when we were working together to try and address this problem. We categorize these buildings in terms of different classifications. So one of those classifications where you find that there is an owner who has lost control of his building and the hijackers have taken over collecting money. You have other buildings where the owner is not present. The owner has just abandoned the building. And have others where the owner is present and is not taking care of the building and therefore requires the city to lay the law down on those people to be able to take care of their building. So there are different strategies for different problems in terms of how they manifest themselves in relation to buildings.
All right, let's go back to Florence Nightingale. I mean, you know the incidents that happened there. What has happened in the last 24 hours to address that situation? The applying for expropriation is in the future, but right now, how have you responded to the crisis?
I beg your pardon?
How have you responded to the crisis right now? Yes, your plan is you are planning to expropriate that building. That's in the future. But right now, where this crisis has happened, how have you responded to it?
So there are families who their properties were completely gutted. We've moved them to a building in the inner city where it's a shelter where they will be accommodated. And the rest of the inhabitants of that building, the Department of Human Settlement commenced with an occupancy audit today in terms of trying to find out who's there, who lives there, so that we can then be able to look for alternative accommodation, alternative temporary accommodation for them. Because we also have started the process of getting engineers to look at that building, whether structurally it's still sound or whether it should be condemned. Yeah. So once we have that report, we will make a final determination. But for now, we're planning to move everyone out of that building into temporary emergency accommodation.
All right, much appreciated. Yeah, always a challenge with these connections. They're deteriorating gradually as we're talking to him. But we got a sense of what he's saying. Is that enough, Nomzamo?
Look, I mean, if they're going to be housed in a dignified manner with their families, I think that will be enough. That's the important part. I think the one thing that I wanted to add is that the idea of hijacking is actually just a colloquial term. It's not hijacking, because if you look at the building, there's a building that we are working on together that he says we've been engaging on. Remington Court, the clients we represent, they've lived there for 30 years. So someone sees how the building looks, says the building is hijacked. They forget that the woman who's staying there is not a hijacker. She's lived there for 30 years. The building is deteriorated because she doesn't have the means. And despite being in a 10-year-long eviction process, the city hasn't come to the party. And so when we talk about hijacking in the inner city, I've actually met very few hijackings. In the sense that we understand the word of someone went in and said, you will start paying rent to me, and pushed the owner out. In most cases,
there are mafias operating.
No. That's definitely not what is happening in the inner city. In the inner city, you had buildings that were abandoned in the 90s to the early 2000s. They were then bought by people who were investing in property, who are now the new owners who are seeking to evict the residents. And then in effect, you have old owners who disappeared, you have residents, and then you have new owners. In effect, when we speak to our clients say, but how are we the hijackers when this person found us here? And that's why we're saying the city has failed in its mandate. And provincial national governments have also failed in their mandate. Because at the end of the day, the problem we're dealing with here is the fact that before the late 80s, black people were not supposed to be in the inner city. And therefore, they had no way to be legally in the inner city. And they were there unlawfully, even if at times they were paying rent. I like the fact that MMC is very honest to say, people admit that they are paying. I'm paying to the sum. So people are willing to pay and are paying. But unfortunately, there are no housing opportunities. So when Mayisela speaks about let's develop affordable rental and how temporary is temporary, if there's nowhere to go, temporary becomes permanent. So you need to have options available for people to move to. And as SERI, we've produced research, we've engaged the city, we've looked at what people earn to say, this is what affordable is. Affordable is between 800 Rand. From 800 Rand, you can't find it in the private market. Right. If you want to pay 800 Rand, 1,000 Rand, that's not in the private market, that's not even in social housing at times. You need, if you're going to pay...
Well, I mean, Mr. Mayisela has admitted so that social housing is actually not affordable.
Yeah. So if that's your affordability, if you earn below 4,000 Rand, you can't afford to rent in the inner city of Joburg unless you're renting in overcrowded circumstances. So we're dealing with a housing crisis here. It's not, I think, 18 months MMC is like really, really optimistic. It needs a long-term plan, and we've had years of engagement. We haven't found each other to actually say, how do we resolve this? How do we use expropriation? How do we engage the province to bring down resources into the city? How do we get the city to act as an entity instead of different parts that are running like headless chickens?
Not a one-night conversation, obviously. There's a whole lot of moving parts. But I'm interested in your collaboration, so I'm going to bring you back to hear how far it is going and where you go.
I think with Siri, I think we are aligned. And I don't want to have Siri, because Siri has been labeled as an enemy. But I engage. I think that what we've actually developed now in the public safety, in terms of the transition, very slowly, and also go into the building and do a maintenance, floor by floor. I think it can work. Then all those people who are staying on that floor were able to say, look now, instead of you paying these ghost accounts we don't know, you can actually pay the city. Right. So I think that it can be done because ours is safety and also the safety and security of our people. Right. Because you get old people who are staying there and I'm worried about them.
Completely
that they must be okay. Yeah.
Much appreciated. Thank you all for coming in. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayisela, for coming online. And that was the City of Johannesburg Public Safety MMC, Dr Mgcini Tshwaku, also the Executive Director for SERI, Nomzamo, Zondo, and Thabo Mayisela, Special Advisor to the Johannesburg Executive Mayor on the Inner City Regeneration.